Around 3,000 years ago, a king sat down and wrote the most desperate letter of his life. 7 enemy ships had appeared off his coast. 7, against a kingdom that had stood for centuries. He never got an answer. Before help could arrive, his entire city was wiped off the map. And that city, Ugarit, was not alone. Within 1 generation, nearly every great power in the Mediterranean collapsed. The Hittite Empire, the Mycenaean Greeks, even mighty Egypt, brought to its knees by invaders from the sea. Cities that had stood for centuries burned one after another, like lights going out along a coastline. Writing disappeared. Trade stopped. Whole regions simply emptied of people and stayed empty for centuries. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse, the closest thing the ancient world ever had to an apocalypse. And here is the unsettling part. 3,000 years later, we still do not fully know what caused it. But the clues that survive tell a story that feels uncomfortably familiar. It begins with a golden age. To understand the fall, you first need to see what fell. This world was anything but primitive. 1300 BC was a globalized age. Egypt, the Hittites, the Greeks, Babylon rival superpowers. Bound together, they traded grain and gold, signed treaties, married their princesses to each other's kings. War was expensive. Trade was better. And their common addiction was bronze, the metal of every sword, every plow, every chariot fitting in the world. But bronze has a weakness. To make it, you need tin. And tin was staggeringly hard to find. The nearest good sources lay as far away as Afghanistan, perhaps even distant Cornwall. Months of travel, one way. Picture that. A sword in Greece depending on a mine 3,000 miles away. That was normal. Every kingdom's strength rested on ships and caravans it did not control, crossing seas it could not guard. Efficiency everywhere. Resilience nowhere. The whole brilliant system worked beautifully right up until the day it didn't. Because in the space of a few decades, the lights started going out, and they never came back on. Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire, one of the mightiest cities on earth, burned and then abandoned forever. No triumphant conqueror ever claimed it. The city of 100,000 simply stopped existing, and the empire followed. In Greece, Mycenae, the legendary fortress of Agamemnon, had already been shattered by an earthquake around 1250 BC. Excavators found bodies crushed in the rubble. The Greeks buried their dead, cleared the stones, and rebuilt. Then, around 1190 BC, Mycenae burned again, and this time, nobody knows who lit the fire. At Pylos, palace scribes kept records on clay tablets right up to the very end. Their final tablets mention watchers guarding the coast. The palace was watching the sea for something. Whatever they were watching for, it came anyway. Around 1180 BC, Pylos was destroyed by fire. The scribes, the archives, the tax rolls, the palace itself gone in a single night of flame. And at Ugarit, the city of the desperate letter, archaeologists found something that settled at least one question. 32 arrowheads, scattered through the ruined streets. Cities do not shoot arrows at an earthquake. Ugarit was not shaken down. It was stormed, sacked, and erased. So, by whom? Egyptian records give the threat a name, and it is a chilling one. The Sea Peoples. Pharaoh Ramses III described a wave of raiders so unstoppable that no land could stand before their arms. They had already swallowed the coasts. In 1177 BC, they reached the richest prize of all Egypt itself. Ramses met them with everything Egypt had left. Archers on the banks, war galleys jamming the river, and Egypt won. His temple walls celebrate a king rejoicing in slaughter, standing on mounds of the fallen. So, mystery solved? Barbarians destroyed the Bronze Age world, and Egypt alone stood firm? Not quite. Look closer at Ugarit's last letter. The king's troops were far away, fighting in Hittite lands. His fleet was off in distant waters. 7 ships were enough, because nobody was home to fight them. And Egypt's great victory? It bled the kingdom so badly that Egypt slid into decline anyway. The Sea Peoples were not an unstoppable army. They were something scarier. a symptom of a dying world, because while the raiders took the blame, the earth itself had quietly turned hostile. Tree rings from Anatolia record a savage drought striking around 1198 BC. The rains simply failed. The Dead Sea's water table dropped more than 50 meters. That is not a dry spell. That is climate collapse. Harvests failed across the region. Granaries emptied. And hungry kingdoms make desperate, moving, dangerous people. Now add earthquakes leveling fortresses. Add revolts inside starving cities. Add raiders circling the coasts like wolves. And now remember the golden web. Tin from Afghanistan. Grain ships. Copper fleets. Everything depending on everything. Sever a few threads and the whole net unravels. No tin means no bronze. No bronze, no army. No army means no trade protection. No trade, no food. Each failure feeding the next, faster and faster. That, most historians now argue, is the real killer. Not one catastrophe, a cascade of them, interlocking. Each shock was survivable alone. Together, they were fatal. The most connected world died of its connections. What followed was silence. In Greece, up to 90% of small settlements were simply abandoned. The art of writing itself vanished with the palaces. Linear B died and stayed dead for 400 years. Children grew up, lived, and died without ever seeing a written word. Historians call it the Greek Dark Ages. Honesty demands a caveat. Re-examining the evidence, scholars found many supposed destructions were misdated, or never happened at all. The collapse was real, but the mystery is still being rewritten today, dig by dig, tablet by tablet. What stands is this. A connected world traded its resilience for efficiency, and paid in centuries of darkness. Our world runs on the same bargain, only faster. Ships, chips, grain, energy, everything depending on everything. The next fragile empire is whichever one believes it cannot fall. Rome believed that too. That story is next.
Empires rise, kings conquer, and every one of them falls. From the pharaohs of Egypt to the marching legions of Rome. From Genghis Khan and the endless steppe to the war chiefs of Africa. From golden kingdoms at their height to cities burning in the dark. Every throne, every battle, every ruin. The story of how it all began and how it all ended. This is history. This is Ruins and Kings.